Picture yourself awake at 3 in the morning. The room is quiet, but your mind is not. You are staring at the ceiling and calculating disasters that have not happened yet. The car could break down, the laptop could die, your employer could call you into a meeting you did not expect, a medical bill could arrive, a pet could need emergency surgery, a family member could need help, rent could rise, insurance could jump. One ordinary problem could become the thing that knocks your entire life off balance. That is what financial fragility feels like. It is not only the absence of money, it is the presence of constant mental pressure. Most people think the first life-changing money milestone is $1 million. They imagine freedom begins when the number is so large that everything changes at once. But in real life, the first major shift often happens much earlier. It happens around $10,000. Not because $10,000 makes you rich, it does not. Not because $10,000 means you can quit your job. It usually does not. Not because $10,000 lets you buy anything you want. It does not come close. The power of $10,000 is not. It is psychological stability. It is the difference between living in reaction and living with options. It is the first meaningful buffer between you and the random shocks of life, and that buffer changes how you think. Money milestones are often treated like arbitrary numbers. People say $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, as if these numbers only matter because they sound clean. But there is psychology and mathematics behind why certain amounts change behavior. A small amount of money can change whether an emergency becomes a catastrophe. A larger amount can change whether you negotiate from desperation or confidence. A still larger amount can change whether work is a necessity or a choice. Each level changes the type of risk you can take and the type of pressure you can survive. The first real level is often $10,000. To understand why, you have to first understand life without it. Life without a buffer means every financial decision is defensive. You walk through a grocery store and do not simply choose food. You calculate, can I buy the name brand or do I need the generic version? Can I afford fruit this week? Should I put something back? If my card is declined, how embarrassing will that be? A friend invites you to dinner, and the first thought is not whether you want to go. It is whether $25 will damage the entire week. You create excuses. You tell yourself you are tired. You say you already ate. What you are really saying is that you cannot afford to participate. The car makes a strange sound, and the first reaction is not annoyance, it is fear, because a $700 repair may mean a credit card balance that grows for months. A $1,500 repair may mean asking family for help. A $3,000 repair may mean choosing between mobility and debt. That is the paycheck to paycheck cycle. It is not only low income, many high income people live inside the same cycle because their spending rose with their income. The amounts are bigger, but the pressure is the same. No margin, no buffer, no breathing room. When there is no buffer, every problem is too close. A flat tire is not a flat tire, it is a threat. A medical bill is not a medical bill, it is a crisis. A bad manager is not just unpleasant, he becomes a person you cannot afford to challenge. A job interview is not an opportunity, it is a risk, because missing a day of work or buying the right clothes might cost money you do not have. This is why the first $10,000 matters. It changes the distance between you and danger when you have zero savings. Risk is everywhere. Taking a new job is risky. Moving is risky. Asking for a promotion feels risky. Taking a certification course feels risky. Going to a networking event feels risky. Starting a small side business feels risky. Even resting can feel risky because time not spent earning feels like time you cannot afford. But when you have $10,000 sitting quietly behind you, the same decisions feel different. The risk has not disappeared. The world has not become safe. But you have a cushion. That cushion changes your behavior. You might ask for the promotion because if the conversation goes badly, you are not completely defenseless. You might look for a better job because you can survive a gap. You might pay for a course because $500 is no longer a life-threatening expense. You might move to a better opportunity because the moving costs are no longer impossible. You might finally stop accepting disrespect because you are not one paycheck from disaster. That is a major shift. The money does not make you reckless. It makes you less trapped. That is one of the biggest differences between people with financial buffers and people without them. People without buffers often appear cautious, but they are not always making careful decisions. They are making desperate decisions. There's a big difference. A desperate person takes the first job offered because they need cash. Now, a buffered person can evaluate fit, pay, culture, commute, and opportunity. A desperate person puts an emergency on a credit card at 22%. A buffered person pays the bill and keeps moving. A desperate person cannot invest in themselves because survival consumes all mental space. A buffered person can think one step ahead. This is the emergency fund effect. The strange thing is that the power of the emergency fund often does not come from spending it. It comes from knowing it is there. Most people who save their first $10,000 do not immediately spend it. They do not suddenly become extravagant. They often become more disciplined because the balance represents something deeper than money. It represents proof that they can build stability. That proof changes identity. Before saving, a person may think, I am bad with money. I cannot save, everything is too expensive. Life always happens to me. After saving $10,000, the story changes. I am someone who can save. I am someone who can plan. I am someone who can absorb a shock. I am someone who can create distance between myself and chaos. Identity is powerful because behavior follows identity. Most people treat saving like a temporary diet. They cut everything brutally for a few weeks, feel deprived, burn out, and return to old spending. That does not create a saver. It creates a person who briefly suffered. The people who reach $10,000 usually do something different. They begin becoming the kind of person who saves, they automate, they notice waste, they delay gratification, they stop seeing every dollar as something to consume. They begin seeing money as a tool for options. This is why the first $1,000 can feel harder than the next $4,000. The first $1,000 requires identity change. It requires proving to yourself that the old pattern can be broken. It requires fighting impulses, habits, and sometimes the social environment around you. The second $1,000 is easier because the system has started. By the fifth or $6,000, the behavior becomes more automatic. By $10,000, something important has happened. You have not only saved money, you have trained a new operating system. That operating system may be more valuable than the money itself, because the same behavior that builds $10,000 can build $50,000, then $100,000, then a portfolio, then real independence. The amounts change, the principles do not. Now, there is also a biological dimension to this. Financial insecurity is not only an idea, it lives in the body. Stress hormones rise when a person feels constantly exposed. Sleep declines, patience declines, decision quality declines, relationships suffer. When you do not know how you would handle an emergency, your nervous system remains alert. It scans, it calculates, it prepares for threats. This is exhausting. A $10,000 buffer does not remove every stress, but it reduces the constant sense that ordinary life might collapse at any moment. A check engine light becomes annoying instead of terrifying. A broken phone becomes a problem instead of a disaster. A medical bill becomes something to manage instead of something that sends you into panic. The shift from panic to annoyance is more valuable than people realize. Panic destroys judgment. Annoyance allows judgment. When money stress falls, people often sleep better. They perform better at work. They communicate better with family. They are more patient with friends. They can think strategically instead of reactively. This is one reason financial advice that only focuses on returns is incomplete. The highest return move is not always the first move. Sometimes the first move is building a buffer that makes every later decision better. A person with no emergency fund who invests every dollar into the market may have a higher expected return on paper. But if one emergency forces them to sell at the wrong time or borrow at high interest, the plan collapses. A person with $10,000 in cash may earn less on that money, but the buffer protects the entire financial system of their life. That protection is an invisible return. It does not show up neatly in a spreadsheet, but it is real. It prevents bad debt, it prevents forced selling, it prevents panic decisions, it prevents stress from taking over. That is why an emergency fund is not only defensive, it is strategic. Most unexpected expenses that damage people financially fall under $10,000. Car repairs, dental work, medical bills, temporary job loss, family emergencies, moving costs, replacement of essential equipment, insurance deductibles, home repairs for many common problems. $10,000 does not cover every disaster. It will not cover a long unemployment period in an expensive city. It will not cover major surgery without insurance. It will not solve a catastrophic lawsuit or a total financial collapse, but it covers many of the ordinary shocks that keep people trapped. That is why it is such a meaningful threshold. It makes you immune to many small and medium disasters, and those are the ones that usually push people into bad debt. The people who never build a buffer are not usually destroyed by one giant event. They are worn down by repeated small shocks, a $600 repair, a $900 bill, a $1,200 surprise, a week of missed income, a family request, a moving deposit, a bad insurance deductible. Each one goes on a credit card, then the interest starts, then the minimum payment grows, then cash flow gets tighter, then the next emergency hits, then the hole gets deeper. The first $10,000 is how you stop the hole from getting deeper. It is not the whole wealth plan. It is the financial floor. Once that floor exists, everything else becomes easier. This is where people begin to understand money differently. Before savings, money feels like something that disappears. It comes in, bills take it, groceries take it, rent takes it, gas takes it, small pleasures take it, then it is gone. After building a savings base, money begins to look like stored options. You see that a dollar not spent today can become freedom tomorrow. You understand that money can wait. You understand that the purpose of money is not only consumption, it is control over timing, choices, and risk. That is a profound change. A person with $10,000 saved is often closer to financial independence than a person earning twice as much with no savings. That may sound strange, but it is true in a behavioral sense. The saver has developed the ability to keep money, Earning is important, but keeping is the foundation. Many people earn high incomes and stay broke because their lifestyle absorbs everything. They make six figures, but they are one missed bonus away from stress. They drive expensive cars, live in nice apartments, eat at expensive restaurants, and have no real buffer. Another person earns far less but saves consistently. That person is learning the skill that builds wealth. The difference is not just income, it is mindset. The first $10,000 teaches the difference between wants and needs. It teaches patience, it teaches restraint, it teaches how to say no to small impulses, so you can say yes to larger options later. It teaches that wealth is not only what you make, but what you do not let leak away. That lesson compounds. Now let us talk about the practical side. A car problem that once felt catastrophic becomes manageable. Most car repairs are not $10,000. They are a few hundred to a few $1,000s when you have no savings. That is a crisis. When you have $10,000, it is frustrating, but not life-changing. Medical issues become more manageable too. Not all medical issues, but many urgent care visits, minor procedures, deductibles, prescriptions, or unexpected health costs become something you can pay rather than something you fear. Job loss becomes survivable for a period depending on your expenses. $10,000 can provide several months of breathing room. That breathing room matters because it changes how you search for work. A desperate job seeker takes the first offer. A person with breathing room can choose more carefully. That choice can change the next 5 years of income. This is where the opportunity side appears. A $10,000 buffer is not only protection from bad things, it creates room for good things. You might discover a certification that costs $2,000 but could increase your income by $10,000 a year. Without savings, it feels impossible. With a buffer, it becomes a rational investment. You might attend a networking event, travel for an interview, buy equipment for a side business, or take a short, unpaid gap to move into a better opportunity. The safety net does not mean you should gamble it away. It means you can consider opportunities that a financially trapped person cannot consider. Options have value. That value is hard to measure, but it is one of the most important benefits of savings. When people have no savings, they often avoid opportunities because the cost of being wrong is too high. When they have savings, they can afford small experiments. Some experiments fail, some pay for themselves many times over. The $10,000 fund gives you the ability to test the world. That is a different way to live. Now, there is another hidden benefit: confidence. When you have money behind you, you carry yourself differently. You negotiate differently. You interview differently. You respond to disrespect differently. You stop accepting every bad deal because you are afraid the alternative is worse. This confidence is not arrogance. It is stability. A person who desperately needs a job often signals desperation. They may accept lower pay, worse hours, weaker benefits, and bad treatment because they feel they have no choice. A person with a buffer can say, "I need this opportunity to make sense." That changes the conversation over time. Those better negotiations can create more income, which then creates more savings, which creates more confidence. This is the positive feedback loop. Financial stability leads to better decisions. Better decisions lead to better outcomes. Better outcomes create more stability. The first $10,000 can start that loop. It also reduces decision fatigue. This may sound abstract, but it matters. When you have no financial buffer, every small purchase becomes a decision. Generic or name brand, drive or walk, lunch out or pack sandwich, replace the shoes or wait another month, buy the medicine or hope it gets better, say yes to the invitation or invent a reason not to go. Each decision burns energy. By the end of the day, the person is exhausted not only from work but from constant micro-calculations about survival. When you have a buffer, many of those decisions lose their danger. You still should be intentional. You still should avoid waste. But you are no longer deciding from fear 50 times. Per Dalton, why? That frees mental bandwidth. A person with mental bandwidth can plan. A person without it only reacts. This is why $10,000 changes more than the bank account. It changes the amount of cognitive capacity available for the future. I have seen people experience this in small but emotional ways. They walk into a grocery store and realize they can choose food based on what they want and what is healthy. Not only what is cheapest, they do not buy recklessly. They simply stop feeling trapped by every shelf. That is a real form of freedom. Not the freedom to be wasteful. The freedom to stop calculating every bite. Many people who have never lived with financial stress underestimate how exhausting those calculations are. They think poor financial decisions come from laziness or ignorance. Sometimes they do, but often they come from exhaustion. When the brain is overloaded, it chooses relief. A buffer reduces overload. That is why saving is not only arithmetic, it is psychology. Now, if you are currently living paycheck to paycheck, $10,000 may sound impossible. That feeling is understandable. But the path does not begin with $10,000. It begins with the first repeated behavior. Maybe that is $25 per month. Maybe it is $50. Maybe it is $100. The number matters less at the beginning than the identity. You are teaching yourself that money can be kept. You are building evidence that you are not trapped forever. You are changing from someone who hopes there will be money left over into someone who pays the future first. That identity shift is the beginning. Trying to save too aggressively can backfire. If you cut every enjoyable thing, you may create a plan that cannot survive real life. The goal is not punishment. The goal is consistency. Look for leaks, convenience purchases, subscriptions you do not use, food delivery that became automatic. Insurance you never compared, phone plans that are too expensive, small fees that add no value, impulse purchases that disappear from memory after 1 week. Most people have more flexibility than they think, but they do not see it until they start tracking. Awareness creates options. If the average person spends thousands per year on coffee, dining out, convenience subscriptions, and small upgrades, redirecting even a portion of that can begin building the first milestone. This is not about never enjoying life. It is about deciding which spending buys joy and which spending only fills space. The waste is not always the latte. Sometimes the waste is unconsciousness. A conscious purchase can be fine. An unconscious pattern can quietly steal your future. The first $10,000 is often built by becoming conscious. Once you become conscious, the next milestone becomes more realistic. The first $10,000 changes how you see the next $10,000. At first, 5 figures feels enormous. After you reach it, you realize it was built by process, not magic. Then $20,000 becomes a matter of continuing, then $50,000, then $100,000. This is how financial independence begins. Not with a windfall, with proof. Proof that you can change behavior, proof that you can keep money, proof that your future can be built deliberately. That proof becomes momentum. There is another area where the buffer matters deeply: relationships. Money stress is one of the most corrosive forces in families and marriages. When bills are tight, people become irritable. Every purchase feels like a judgment. Every mistake feels larger. Every small disagreement can become a proxy battle for fear. A buffer does not make relationships perfect, but it removes a category of constant stress. When you are not worried about whether one bill will break you, you have more emotional energy for the people around you. You become less reactive. You listen better. You are less embarrassed. You do not withdraw from social situations as much. You do not resent friends who seem more stable. Money stress isolates people. A buffer reconnects them to life. That matters. We often talk about savings as if it exists only in spreadsheets, but savings also changes how a person participates in the world. The person with no savings may avoid dinners, weddings, trips, birthdays, networking, and even medical care. They disappear socially because every event has a cost. The person with a buffer can choose. They still may say no, but it is a choice, not a shame. Based escape. This is why $10,000 can feel larger than it is. It gives dignity. Dignity is not easy to price, but it is real. Now, there is an important warning. When people reach $10,000, some start to feel too comfortable. They think the buffer is extra money. They start using it for things that are not emergencies or strategic opportunities. The fund becomes a vacation fund, then a shopping fund, then a repair fund, then it is gone. That is not the purpose. The first $10,000 is the foundation. You do not build a house by selling the foundation, you protect it. This does not mean the money can never be used. It exists to be used if necessary. But after use, it should be rebuilt quickly. The fund is not a trophy. It is a system component. A person who spends the emergency fund and never rebuilds it has not gained stability. They rented it briefly. The right approach is to define the purpose clearly. This money is for genuine emergencies and high-conviction life improvements that increase stability or earning power. Not impulse, not status, not proving anything, not small lifestyle upgrades that slowly drain the account. Once the $10,000 foundation is built, you can begin separating money into different roles: emergency money, investment money, opportunity money, fund money, tax money, short-term goals, long-term goals. This is how money becomes organized. Before that, all money often feels like one pile that gets attacked by everything. After the first milestone, you can create structure. Structure reduces chaos. Now let us talk about risk again, because this is where the lesson becomes especially important. A person with no savings often cannot take good risks. Good risks include applying for a better job, learning a new skill, starting a small project, moving for opportunity, negotiating harder, or investing in a tool that increases earning power. Bad risks include using credit cards to survive, taking payday loans, ignoring maintenance until it becomes worse, staying in a bad job because no alternative feels safe, or making desperate financial moves. The absence of a buffer pushes people away from good risks and into bad risks. That is the tragedy. They appear risk-averse because they cannot afford to take good risks, but their life becomes more risky because they are constantly exposed to emergencies. A $10,000 buffer reverses part of that. It lets you decline bad risks and consider good ones. That is how wealth begins, not through reckless speculation, through the ability to choose better risks. This is also why emergency savings should usually come before aggressive investing for people who are financially fragile. The math of investing may say the market has higher long-term returns, but personal finance is not only math, it is behavior under stress. If you invest every spare dollar and then one emergency forces you to sell, borrow, or panic, the plan fails. The emergency fund is what allows investing to remain invested. It is the shock absorber. Without a shock absorber, every bump can damage the vehicle. With one, the ride becomes survivable. Now, some people ask whether $10,000 should be in cash if inflation is eroding it. That is a reasonable question. Cash loses purchasing power over time, but the job of this first $10,000 is not maximum return. Its job is immediate stability. You should not put your emergency fund into something volatile just because you want it to grow faster. If the market falls at the same time your emergency arrives, the asset failed at its job. The emergency fund should be accessible, safe, and boring. Boring is the point. Once the foundation is built, additional money can be invested for growth. Do not confuse the foundation with the engine. Your emergency fund is the foundation, your investments are the engine. A good financial house needs both. If you build only engine and no foundation, the house shakes. If you build only foundation and no engine, you never grow. The sequence matters. First stability, then growth. That is the order most people skip because growth is exciting and stability is boring. But boring stability is what gives exciting growth the time to work. The first $10,000 also changes the way you experience your job. Without savings, a job can feel like a cage. You may hate it, but you cannot leave. You may know you are underpaid, but you are afraid to negotiate. You may see a better opportunity, but you fear the transition. You may tolerate disrespect because rent is due. With savings, the cage door opens a little. You may still choose to stay, but staying becomes a choice, not a sentence. That distinction has enormous psychological value. People perform better when they feel they have options. They think more clearly, they become less afraid of authority. They can evaluate whether a job serves their long-term goals rather than only asking whether it pays this Friday. This can lead to better career decisions. Better career decisions can lead to higher income can lead to faster savings. Again, the positive loop begins, the buffer creates confidence. Confidence improves decisions, decisions improve outcomes, outcomes strengthen the buffer. This is why the first milestone matters more than the number itself. It changes the direction of the loop. A fragile person lives in a negative loop. Stress creates bad decisions. Bad decisions create more stress. More stress creates fewer options. Fewer options create worse decisions. A buffered person can start a positive loop. Stability creates better decisions. Better decisions create more stability. More stability creates more opportunities. More opportunities create better outcomes. That is what $10,000 can do. It can flip the loop. Now, let us be honest about the scale. $10,000 is not enough for every family. If your monthly expenses are high, if you have dependents, if you live in an expensive city, if your job is unstable, if you have medical risks, if you are self-employed, you may need more. The milestone is not universal perfection, it is a meaningful first threshold. For some people, $10,000 is 3 months of expenses. For others, it is 1 month. For others, it is 6 months. The exact number should eventually be tailored to your life. But as a psychological milestone, $10,000 is powerful because it is large enough to cover many emergencies and small enough to be reachable for ordinary people with discipline and time. That combination matters. $1 million feels abstract. $10,000 feels difficult but possible. Possible is important. A goal that feels impossible does not change behavior. A goal that feels possible but challenging can organize behavior. That is what the first $10,000 does. It gives the mind a target, then the target shapes habits. Now, what happens after you reach it? The next step is not to stop. The next step is to preserve the emergency fund and begin directing additional savings toward wealth. Building assets, retirement accounts, index funds, skill development, business capital, debt reduction. If high-interest debt exists, the order depends on your situation. But the principle is that the foundation should now support growth. Once you are not constantly defending against emergencies, you can begin playing offense. That is the broader transformation. Defense is avoiding collapse, offense is building the future. Most paycheck-to-paycheck households never get to play offense. They are too busy blocking the next emergency. The first $10,000 is what allows the game to change, and this is why the milestone is not merely financial. It is emotional, it is physical, it is strategic, it is social, it is professional. It changes how you sleep, how you spend, how you negotiate, how you evaluate risk, how you relate to people, and how you see yourself. That is a lot of impact from a number that does not make you rich. But the first real freedom is not being rich. It is not being constantly afraid. That is the beginning. Fear is expensive. Fear makes people borrow badly. Fear makes people stay in bad jobs. Fear makes people avoid opportunities. Fear makes people fight with loved ones. Fear makes people choose short-term relief over long-term progress. Reducing fear is one of the best investments you can make. The first $10,000 reduces fear. That reduction creates room for intelligence. And intelligence applied consistently builds wealth. So if you are at zero, do not despise the small start. The first $25 matters. The first $100 matters. The first $500 matters. The first $1,000 matters. Every deposit is not only money, it is a vote for a new identity, a vote that says I am not only a consumer, I am a builder. I am not only surviving this month, I am creating margin for the future. I am not waiting for life to get easier before I become disciplined. I am becoming disciplined so life can become easier. That is the shift. By the time you reach $10,000, the bank balance is only part of the achievement. The larger achievement is who you had to become to reach it. That person is calmer. That person has more options. That person can think beyond Friday. That person can say no. That person can say yes to the right opportunity. That person is less easily manipulated by fear. That person is the foundation of everything that comes next. This is why I think the first $10,000 is one of the most underrated milestones in money. It is not glamorous. It will not impress people on social media. It will not make you look rich, but it will make you harder to break. And before you can become wealthy, you must become hard to break. Wealth is not only built by chasing upside, it is built by surviving downside. The person who survives emergencies without going backward can keep compounding. The person who gets knocked back to zero every time life happens cannot. So the first job is to stop the resets. The first $10,000 helps stop the resets. After that, the next milestones become possible: $25,000, $50,000, $100,000, investments, assets, freedom. But do not skip the first one because it looks boring. Boring is often what makes the rest possible. The world rewards people who can stay in the game long enough for compounding to work. A person with no buffer is always at risk of being forced out of the game. A person with $10,000 has a better chance to stay. That is why this number matters. Not because it is the destination, because it is the first real platform. And once you stand on a platform instead of quicksand, you can finally look further ahead. That is when everything begins to change.